Jim Joyce. Look at this. Look at this. Look at
Hey,
this.
what a Wednesday, man. What a Wednesday.
What a Wednesday. And right off the Euronext today, right? Were you
Right after
there all
Euronext.
day?
Yeah,
Amazing.
we just did a closing ceremony. So we HealthBeacon started trading life as a publicly listed company this morning. So we went public on the Euronext Dublin, ticker symbol HBCN.
Hold on. Let me call my broker. No, I don't. Does anybody actually use brokers these days? Anyway, HBCN.
I guess I do. Yeah. HBCN. Yeah, we're listed on so we're now a publicly traded company. We begin life as a publicly traded company. Exciting.
Can you still talk to me?
Yeah, totally. I might need it more so. There's like a shot of digital health therapy. I think it's going to be more of a requirement, not less,
Honestly, again, we were kind of reminiscing a couple of weeks ago, a little bit, right? It was sort of in the kind of the pre-announcement, for lack of a better term. But I think it's amazing what you and the team have accomplished. And, I had the pleasure of meeting many of your team members. So kudos to everyone. It's, hard work, dedication, persistence, love, some hugs.
Well, they consider you part of the team. They consider, like, there was always like, well, Eugene could solve that for us. So Eugene comes in, everyone knows you're a mini celebrity. You walk into the Boston office, I think they prepare, your coffees or Bartesians for you.
Bartesians, I enjoyed the Bartesians. So shout out to all the teams. But I am glad to be back here. We skipped last week. Believe it or not, there are some people actually noticed, like, where the hell is the shot? I had the pleasure of, on separate virtual stages, hosting the CB Insights Future of Health event. So thanks to Julie and Mary to invite me. It was fun. And what else? I'm just glad. I think we skipped 2 so far in our almost 2. Well,
2 years.
I don't know. We're approaching like 100 episodes. I'll get the count when I'm uploading this one. I just haven't, but it's crazy.
That's close. Is it close to 2 years? Up into March of next year will be 2 years, right? It was like March or April or something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a lot of episodes.
I don't even remember how many hours. Like, we just got the celebrate your YouTube thing email. It's like thousands upon thousands of hours people watched us. That's crazy. Anyway, speaking of I don't know, speaking of what, because it's not definitely crazy, even though he's a cool dude. But let's invite Ankit Jain, who, we'll go a little bit through his
background,
his background and stuff. But Ankit, there you are.
Hey, Ankit.
How's it going, guys?
Okay. All right.
I can hear you perfectly.
So first of all, this is welcome to the shot, and we just got done talking because officially Jim's company floated on the Euronext in Dublin today.
Wow!
And he still made the time to for the shot. And I usually don't drink wine on this show, but I'm gonna toast to you and to the success of the team going forward. Awesome. And whatever. So cheers.
Congratulations. Awesome. The only thing I have around is some hand sanitizer, so I'll take a shot of that.
Right. I have, like, I don't know.
Hey, it is alcohol, right? But we're not advertising that just yet. Exactly. So
yeah, we're going to go to the dinner after this. So we're going to go to the little bit of the broker that took us public is doing a bit of a dinner at Gilboa's here in Dublin City Center afterwards. So so I'll have a toast then to you guys.
So anyway. Ankit, Jim, Ankit. Ankit and I met randomly, speaking of the bar and digital health. I think we met at a bar. Somebody kind of tapped both of our shoulders, something that you should meet at JPM, which, by the way, apparently is not happening. I just saw 4 hours ago, right? An announcement. Precautionary, I think just they made a call, right? I have to say, I posted on LinkedIn, like, who's going, who's not. 20% saying yes. This was before the JPM announcement. 40% said no, just Zooming. And then the other 30% said, I'm just kind of waiting and watching the variants, right? That was the 3 options I gave. So anyway, back to, instead of us talking, Ankit, we met 4-ish years ago, I think, at a bar and just kept in touch. And But I'll shut up for you to introduce and give us a little bit of your journey to us and the millions of viewers and listeners that we have.
Amazing. No, we met at the bar at Park 55
Oh,
in
wow.
San
You
Francisco.
actually, I guess I was more memorable to you than you were to me. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly. Well, no, actually, to be fair, their Chex Mix has been memorable to me since that night.
Okay. Okay.
So I've gone back there for their Chex Mix. I've not gone back since the pandemic, so I hope they still have it. But that was the first time I kind of went to that bar. But yeah, no, it was great to meet you then, and I think you were still at Bayer back then. I was at Google. Because I was running Google's AI venture fund, Gradient Ventures. I'd helped start it, and getting my feet a little wet in the healthcare world. I'd done my first few investments in that space, and especially a couple in the pharma world. And I think that JPM really got my brain working more than it normally does on what does it mean to build a career in healthcare. At that time as an investor, but inevitably became as an entrepreneur, kind of getting back to the roots of building companies, which I've done a couple of times in the past. But in the what I've done in the past has been more on the search, recommendations, big data, AI realm, but never in the healthcare realm. And so, what we're doing at Infinitus now is taking some of the back office operations that plague healthcare, especially in the US, and using technology to automate those tedious, routine, mundane processes so that people that work in healthcare can focus on healthcare and on the roles that require passion, empathy, and science. Rather than waiting on hold on a phone call or receiving a fax and then just typing up what you just received because the other party that sent it to you sent it from a computer too.
What's a fax? No, I'm kidding. But actually, I'm just going to pause you just for a second, Ankit. Are we allowed to say the word plague, Jim, on this show? Yeah, I think we've sort of relaxed the rules. So the whole point of this, Ankit, is that you're not supposed to say, C19 any way, shape, or form. This was our safe space. And so, maybe pandemic, plague,
now,
we're just busting your chops a bit.
Were you actually born in Google, or what did you do before Google? Were you born?
Let's back up. Let's back up all the way.
I was born in a ball pit in Google. No, I was actually born I grew up in India, in Bombay, in the late 80s, early 90s. My dad is a technologist by trade. And in the 90s, being a technologist in India and growing meant at some point you were made a manager, which a lot of people say, yes, you're now a manager. And he's too technical to want to be the kind of manager that they wanted in India at the time, which was tell people where to sit when they can take time off and get completely away from technology. It was really people management.
Right.
And he said, I need to find myself deeper into technology again. And that need of his brought us to Silicon Valley. So we moved to the Valley in 97. And since then, he's done 3 startups of his own, all in the network security space, lived through a lot of very interesting stories. So at home, my mom was the stable breadwinner. She's on the accounting side at PwC, been there for 25 years now. And my dad kept leaving jobs, or startup got an acquisition and left it. Startup failed. Startup had an acquisition, and every time we stayed on my mom's health insurance. It's a good ratio. 2 out of 3 is
ratio you just described. So
yeah. 2 out of 3. It's great. And for me, there were so many lessons growing up, about being a technologist, but then having the grit and courage to build companies, and what it means to go through a downturn when you're an entrepreneur, and what it also means to have a partner that is supportive, and how important that is in just kind of surviving, right? And I don't think enough people talk about that piece when we talk about just building a company. It's the role your partner plays.
100%.
Well, Maureen and I talk about it all the time. So, running the business together.
Like my wife Emanuela, like if I don't give, like you saw, like I have to pay incredible homage to her. Similar to your father, she always had the stable job, and I was always setting up companies. So But it's important. It means everything. You're right. People don't really talk about it. Eugene and I do, because we're kind of open books, but
and so after that, going out of high school in the Bay Area, I ended up in another part of the Bay Area, which was at UC Berkeley, undergrad and grad school there in computer science and business. My mom made sure I took every accounting class there is, which was because she's like, you just can't just be a copy of your dad. You need to get a little bit of me and you as well. And it was fascinating to me because people used to make these charts of accounts and balance sheets on graph paper because it had all the boxes. And I used to come in with an Excel spreadsheet and print it out and it looked better. And it was fascinating. Why isn't everybody just doing this? But after grad school, joined a startup as an engineer. We were trying to build a search engine to compete with Google, a company called Cool. And it was a great kind of boom and bust story, incredible team, a lot of experience. The founders of Alta Vista, the folks that built a lot of early days of Google, built an incredible technology team.
Was that with a K, by the way, or with a
no? It's
with a C.
It's CUIL. It's an Irish word, which I believe means wisdom, because the two out of the three founders were Irish.
We're going to give you an Irish, a Gaelic test, Jim.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think, because I'm based here in Dublin, Dublin, Ireland. Yeah, so I remember I'm trying to think of what timing was that?
This was 2007, 2008. So we kind of announced the company, I want to say July 21st, 2008. It was this day of epic failure that I don't think anybody on the team, or most people in Silicon Valley, had never really experienced. We had 4,000 news articles, 400 TV spots, and something like 80 million people that tried our search engine, and it wasn't ready for prime time. And so we failed miserably. I remember the launch party, the CEO kind of stood up and said, no other company will ever fail like this again. And I think a few have after, but it's very few and far in between.
But by the way, Ankit, this is some very unknown fact, actually, that I don't think Jim, you and I have been spoken about. I think this was for me, I'm trying to remember what year the hell it was, but just like you were trying to build a search, competitor to Google, this was pre-Facebook. I did a whole summer internship. I thought it was in college at 6degrees.com. which was supposed to be exactly that. And Andrew Weinreich, I think he's still investing in entrepreneur in New York City, but it just brought me back for a second. Sorry to take it away from the Google days, but I just
So this was fascinating because it taught me a lot of very interesting lessons. It taught me it's okay to fail, but it's also important to take big shots, right? It's very courageous for someone to not only take that shot, but then to talk about it publicly and accept failure. And it really spoke to the quality of the team and what it takes to build a team of that that is resilient to that. I think there were definitely fallout from that, but for me, as someone just out of grad school, it was like people will support you if you do something like that, and that kind of makes the world of entrepreneurship and VC special, is because people want you to take those difficult shots on goal, because if it does succeed, it changes the world. But the core team ended up getting acqui-hired into Google, where we built something called Google Play and launched it and helped scale it. And so that team, the core 7 or 8 people stayed together.
As in Google Play
correct.
Store? Okay.
Correct.
Wow.
So we were part of the core team
that kind of helped launch it.
Yeah. And my journey took me to kind of leading a lot of the engineering teams for Google Play, the search, recommendation, storage, infrastructure, basically everything other than UI and billing for Google Play. At some point, I helped build out. But that entrepreneur bug in me that my dad had kind of placed was growing stronger and stronger, especially after this kind of 5-year journey across Cool and Google with that team.
Did you say, sorry, Mom, I didn't get your accounting bug?
Well, she said, I'm glad you have the accounting basics.
Yes.
Hopefully you don't blow through money the way your previous startup did, and you kind of look at your books on a regular basis. But left to start a company in the mobile competitive intelligence space. So we got a little piece of software on about 250 million phones. So the experience from Android and Google and the ecosystem helped me on the distribution side of my first startup as a founder. But it was a technology breakthrough that I really was going after. The thing that really annoyed me was ads that were there in the mobile world in 2013. Every time I saw an ad on the phone, I was like, this is just not related to me. But running personalization on Android, I realized how much data there was on our phones. And I was like, what if you could use that data to really improve the quality of ads? Now, I soon realized that I'm not someone that is too passionate about the ads ecosystem. And so got into the world of personalizing other people's apps instead of for Google's apps. So we helped companies like BuzzFeed and Flipkart, a lot of retail and content companies do auto personalization and instantaneous personalization in their apps. And in return, we got to aggregate that data and release competitive analytics for the mobile world. And that business was growing nicely when a competitor on the website, a company called SimilarWeb, reached out and said, hey, we're building competitive analytics on the web. You're building competitive analytics on mobile. What customers really want is a holistic picture of what are people doing in the digital world. And that's when we sold the business to SimilarWeb and helped them really start making inroads on the mobile side. And they about 8 months ago went public, and it's been fun to watch that business grow.
And you were only I'm assuming 19 years of age by the time you achieved all this.
No. I was by this time. I think I was 30 because I remember the sale of Quetra to SimilarWeb happened a day after my wedding, and that's the reason I know. When that time period was. But if you go back to the cool days, one of the founders was Anna Patterson. She stayed at Google through this whole journey. She'd actually been at Google before starting Cool. And she was getting itchy to get back on the startup side, but more on the investing side of things. And so she was internally pitching the idea of an AI-focused venture fund. She and I stayed in touch. She's been a mentor through my career, and she said, "Hey, Ankit, it's been about 1.5 years since you sold Quetra. Are you thinking about what's next? I'm thinking about launching a new AI venture fund for Google. Do you want to come back to Google and get on the investing side and help me launch and build a fund?" And it's not every day you get to launch a fund for Google and kind of learn the venture side of things. I'd been doing a little bit of angel investing. And so it was a great opportunity to kind of go start. That's why I went back to Google and helped get Gradient started. And, it's
awesome.
4 years in, and the fund is doing pretty well, but everything is AI these days. So, the idea of an AI fund is fun. It's kind of like there's crypto funds today. I wonder how much of the world, or Web3 funds, how much of the world will be Web3 in 5 or 10 years.
Did you like doing the venture investing? What did you like about it? You obviously have to say no to a lot of people. It's kind of a heavy analytical. You obviously have an engineer or an accountancy background, so that kind of plays into it. Did you like it?
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it tremendously. I learned a lot. I mean, the biggest, and I tell a lot of friends of mine who are between startups, spend some time on the venture side. It's incredible to be able to hear 2,000 pitches in a couple of years and see how different people tell their story. Because so much of the job of an entrepreneur is telling stories. You're telling stories to investors, to customers, to employees, to your team on an ongoing basis, and every other, to the media. And storytelling is a critical part of a leader's job. And the best way to learn is to see people that are good and see people that aren't so good at it, because you're able to figure out what works for you. And everyone's storytelling style is different. So that was one thing that I loved about venture. The second thing I loved about venture was the constant learning of new areas. I invested in a number of infrastructure companies, but then I invested in some companies that were doing pharma supply chain stuff, and a company that was doing airline routing optimization, and a company that is building the future, the next generation Dell from a hardware perspective, but using AI and machine learning to be able to do that. And you don't get that kind of exposure in a in a normal environment. But the thing that was most satisfying to me, Jim, if I was to be completely transparent, was the relationships I was able to build with entrepreneurs. And I think the best investors and best partners are able to get people to just be friends and reach out in times of stress. I think we live in a world where, as a CEO, you have to keep portraying this up into the right motion. You have to keep talking about how things are going well. And I think a lot of people mistakenly think that's exactly what you need to tell your investors as well. If you're telling investors everything's going well, well, what are they going to do? They're going to leave you alone because they're like, keep doing what you're doing. But I think the best investors actually want to help. And people like to help when you're having issues with something. So you need to open up about that. And to this day, there's a number of companies and founders that I invested in 3-4 years ago that still text me saying, hey, I want to run something by you because you've known my journey since the beginning and known me as a person since the beginning. And that's a very fulfilling part of the journey.
It's interesting because I think about that a lot, and you'll hear from the venture side, and obviously, like, all of us have been probably on kind of both sides of the equation, whether inside a big company or and then you'll hear venture capitalists complain, maybe isn't the right word. They're saying, oh, entrepreneurs can't just tell us everything's up and to the right. They have to tell us when they're struggling, because, we won't believe you if you just say everything's going well. But if you really think about that, that's it. The ability to tell someone your weakness is, you're making yourself vulnerable, and you have to trust the person you're giving that information into. So, if the venture capitalist isn't able to convince the entrepreneur that they can be trusted with information that might not be so flattering or might be there, I always think about this, like, I'll tell people I trust all my problems. I got to tell Eugene everything that's going wrong, but
and I try to close my ears and, no. But, this actually brings up an awesome part of the discussion, right? The vulnerability. And I don't think entrepreneurs talk enough about being vulnerable and honest and transparent. And you know what? It's, to your point, storytelling, yes, but there are moments where, like, it's that famous cartoon that I keep mentioning. It's like, oh yay, oh yay, right? But your comment on trust and VCs, trust is earned, right? And to a certain extent, it's not like you call up and say, hey, I'm raising a fund now, put money in, right? It's a relationship building process. And the hope is that all entrepreneurs out there bring the VCs that they trust and they want to build stuff with, instead of just for their capital, right? And sort of, and that's when you tell the story, yeah, everything okay, leave me alone and I'll figure out my own challenges, which is not the relationship you want to start with.
I mean, the truth is, trust isn't built overnight. And I think a lot of founders think about talking to VCs when they need money or when they think they're ready for money, and then do this kind of 2 to 4 week quick dating period, which, if you're looking for partners at the early stage who you can build trust with, those relationships have to be built over years, which is part of the reason. And, like, some of the most incredible world changers have been first-time entrepreneurs. But if you look at the statistic, the reason second-time entrepreneurs on average tend to be more successful is because a lot more decisions are made based on relationships and network than they are on just success or failure or how one meeting or dinner went. And with that comes a lot of trust, and with that comes the ability to be vulnerable. And it's the same thing is true when as you build out your leadership team or your team in general. How do you make it a safe space to be vulnerable and build that trust? It doesn't happen overnight, but you have to work at it. And I don't think enough people think about that partnership between an investor and the company or the founder that same way.
So when you look at
Good. I was going to try to fast forward us to what made you get into healthcare, but if there's a question,
that's exactly where I was going to go. You go.
Oh, look at that! We're synced up, man. We're synced up. What was the trigger? What was the trigger?
The trigger was my wife. I give my wife a lot of credit for opening my eyes to parts of healthcare that I had no idea about. So 2018, Google I/O. Sundar, the CEO, got on stage and demoed something called Google Duplex, which was making phone calls to salons and restaurants to make reservations.
I remember.
And
Yeah.
it went viral, and I came home. And I was like, Shelby, you have to see this demo. I showed it to her, and I was like, there's speech to text with NLP, with text to speech, all in 500 milliseconds. It's incredible, right? And you guys can probably see my excitement as I say that. And then she goes, that's really cool. I don't know what those things mean, but if someone brought this to healthcare, it would change healthcare. And I said, what do you mean? She's like, well, everybody's calling everybody else. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, the healthcare back office is just people calling each other. And she gave me a couple of examples, and she used words like prior authorization and benefit verification and claims.
Ooh.
And I was like, what do these words mean? I have no idea.
Obviously, that was not a turn on for you, those words.
Well, those words to me were like natural language processing to her, right? Like completely different. But as a VC, my job was to do diligence. And so I created a make-believe company in my mind, and I started calling people that I would view as potential customers. Or actually, before that, I called about 150 doctor's office, physical therapists, walked into every pharmacy in the area, and just talked to the front office staff member and said, are you on the phone? What kind of calls do you make? And those words of prior authorization and benefit verification just kept, or the scheduling just kept coming over and over again.
Right.
And I remember the Walgreens that's here on 4th and King in San Francisco, 4th and Townsend. The person was like, yeah, we spend probably 20% of our time. These are pharmacists and pharmacy technicians just on the phone. And I was like, this is crazy. These people are getting paid probably top dollar in San Francisco, even top dollar in other cities, to wait on hold. That sounds crazy.
Right.
And that was kind of the trigger to say, something should be done. And I had my co-founder Sham. He and I went to middle school and high school together. Did our last company together, so it was a natural, weekly catch up in life. And I was like, hey, there's this huge problem that I think there is in healthcare, but we need to build something that is akin to Google Duplex, but can make really complicated phone calls. Because as I started digging in, one of these prior authorization phone calls can be 45 minutes long, not a 2-minute long conversation. And it has a lot of idiosyncrasies, lots of nuances, because every therapeutic area is different. And, I can go on about that. And he's like, we can build a technology. Let's find the business. And we started calling companies that would be potential purchasers of this. And everyone said, well, if you have a company and a product like this, we'll buy it. Because one company was like, I've got 4,000 people that are just making these calls 8 hours a day. And they much rather be spending, and we need 4,000 more people to be talking to patients. And so the goal wasn't to displace roles with technology. It was to have more time to talk to patients. And, it's been phenomenal to watch this kind of go from a seed to a tiny little plant and start growing. And the pandemic in many ways was a light under a lot of people, was a fire under a lot of people, because we suddenly got into a world of huge labor shortages, and back office delays cause delays in therapy, and they cause increase in healthcare spend, because, well, if people aren't getting on therapy or not adherent, well, the downstream impact of that is crazy. And so being able to use technology to do things that you don't have humans to do is almost more important than things that technology can do better than humans.
So fundamentally, and where are you? Where are you right now? Is your technology live? Is it being deployed? In decent sized systems?
I was going to look for the video. Maybe you'll comment later when I post this, Ankit, with the video, because I was blown away. I did this actually at Health, HLTH. You put a VR set on me, and I kind of watched the whole thing. So we'll link to it on the post. It blew me away.
Yeah, it's we went live about 2 years ago. We started doing the first calls about 2 years ago. So it took us about 8 months to build the first prototype, and we've of course grown since. We've made calls on behalf of about 35,000 providers around the country at this point, and growing pretty quickly. Also working with some very large players like AmerisourceBergen and Trial Card and a few others, and just starting to figure out, how do we standardize how some of these calls are done? How do we drive efficiencies, not just on the behalf of those that are making the calls, right? So today we make those outbound calls, and so we want to standardize it so it's easier to automate. But if we standardize it, we can also go to the folks receiving the calls and say, well, we're making so many calls and our machines are talking to your humans. If you have some of this data available digitally, we can integrate it and reduce how much time you spend answering these calls. So, because our goal here is really to drive that interoperability so that we can get rid of the phone calls. If we succeed as a company,
it's like not just in. It's like double dipping on the revenues, right? Because you sort of automate one side and then you come to the other side and say, well, we've just automated the hell out of this one. Do you want to sign up? Right. So it's double dipping on it.
It's like a robot. It's like a robot being driven in a Tesla.
That's a really, really fun analogy. I think it's that's a really fun analogy. In my mind, hopefully in a few years, we can start saying we don't even need phone calls anymore, because if you've got two machines, they shouldn't talk in English. They should be talking in bits and bytes. And that's the future that we want to build.
Like, yeah, exactly. That's amazing. That's amazing. No, I'm looking forward to the to see the VR, to see the example. That's phenomenal. And also, I also think one of the things, like, one of the knock-ons effect as you go into healthcare, I can't think of anything more soul crushing than being on hold. So I think like knock-on effect. I mean, like everyone, like, my wife is just trying to get our dog, through Lufthansa, to fly from Dublin to Italy, and like the amount of pain, and she's in pain, and probably the person receiving is in pain as she's trying to get the dog cert, and then she's putting us into pain in the house because she's complaining about it. So the health impact was huge in the Joyce house.
And actually the mental health impact, right? Because we talk about caregivers, right? And ability for caregivers to make phone calls on the behalf of the patients. And that's even more frustrating as you're watching your loved one, and you're just trying to navigate, how do you get an x-ray approved or whatever it is. My question, because I had the beautiful part of actually watching that demo, where I was kind of a little bit of the skeptic, and I'm going to sort of place that question on, if I'm a customer service representative on one side and I get this phone call and there's this like Siri-like or an automated robotic voice asking me questions, am I like weirded out? Or am I kind of like happy that I'm not talking to a live person and I can just answer the questions, not deal with another person? So I'm curious what you're finding.
Yeah, so at the end of every call that we do, 95% of calls that we do, we ask the question, how was your experience chatting with me? The machine asks that to the human, and overwhelmingly people say, it was incredible, it was efficient. A couple of people say, I'm just glad you're not yelling at me. Right? Like, just think about the frustration of the person calling. And many people say it was okay, it was good. But it's one of those things where the first few times I think it was weird for folks. And a lot of the payers, when we call them, initially were like, well, should we talk to a machine? How do we know it's not a scammer? And it took a simple conversation of saying, well, how do you know James, who calls in, is not a scammer? Well, they're like, we ask 3 questions to do a HIPAA validation. Like, you should ask the same questions of the machine. And if the machine can answer it, well, then it's as legitimate as a person calling in. And they're like, I guess that makes sense. So it tends to be more efficient. It doesn't ask repetitive questions. It's very clear. And more, one of the things that we've had to build, which has been very fulfilling, is the ability to do real-time checks on whether the machine thinks the agent is giving the right information. And if not, push back and say, can you check this for me? Because it doesn't seem right, because of all the pattern matching that the machine does. The folks receiving the calls love it, because their QA teams are like, hey, you're doing real-time QA for us, so we don't have to call back and fix misinformation that we gave. So even when we have new agents, they're performing well because your machine is making sure they're doing well. So there's a lot of things that are different. You have to get used to it. But overall, I think it's been very well received.
That's awesome.
Listen, awesome. And we want to keep digging deeper, but I think I'm going to have to do this over a WhatsApp call. Because you and I stand between Jim and his team's celebration of going public and watching HBCN is the ticker. Everybody check it out.
Awesome. Yeah.
So Jim, why don't you do your famous question of the show?
Yeah. So on
it,
it's
gonna be tough.
Picture yourself. Yeah. Picture yourself as a wise, kind of aged, very successful veteran giving advice to a young engineering accountancy student that has moved from Bombay to the, kind of a little lost in the Silicon Valley area and had some exposure and internships through world famous technology companies. And he's come up with this phenomenal idea to put, robots into Teslas and deliver them to do clinical appointments in the home setting or something as visionary as that. What advice would you give that young entrepreneur?
I think everyone gives advice of the sort, just be gritty, don't be afraid of failure, and just go after your dreams, be passionate, work hard. But the one piece of advice that one of my mentors at Google gave me, a gentleman by the name of James Colatouros. He's been there for a long time. When I met him as a 25-year-old over lunch, he was very kind to meet me for lunch then. He was like, Ankit, you have a lot of energy, you're going fast, keep that going. But remember, it takes 1 year to get 1 year's experience. Learn from that. And I think sometimes kind of stepping back and just saying that it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to have successes, but some things just come with time. A business grows, like in healthcare especially, you have to have patience. The world isn't going to change right away. Everyone means well, but we also don't want to risk everybody's lives. And so it's okay for some things to take some time. And that's part of the journey, and you should enjoy that.
That was a wonderful, wonderful advice. So thank you for making the time. Jim, enjoy the evening with the team. Well deserved.
Congratulations.
And Ankit, I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Thank you.
Ankit, absolute pleasure. Good luck with everything. Thanks for the advice. I love this though. Time takes time. Like, I love it. Great words of wisdom. So best of luck.
Jim's dinner speech is going to include that somehow tonight.
But congrats on all your success. I can't wait to be a beneficiary of your world-changing technology.
Thanks so much.
All right. Cheers.
All right. Cheers.